The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Oh, yes, the Detroit Lions find another way to win.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast.
His Packers just got swept by the Lions. Yes, I'm wearing my floppy hat. It was floppy hat night tonight. Got my my Lions floppy hat. You like that? Whew, what a game. Jake Bates kicks the game-winning field goal from 31 yards out as the Detroit Lions decide at the end of this game, instead of taking the field goal on 4th and inches, instead they go for it on 4th and 1. David Montgomery gets the first down, moves them even closer, a decision that what was interesting was on the radio side, TJ Lang was like, go for it. And Lomas Brown's like, no, take the points. And TJ's like, you don't want to give Jordan Love the ball back with 45 seconds to go. Dan Campbell, who was gambling all night, sometimes good, sometimes bad, decided to go for it. The Lions got it, ran the clock down, and Jake Bates kicks the game-winning field goal to win it 34-31. Think about this. The Lions against the Packers this year, in the 2 games that they've won, on 4th down, 7 out of 8. 7 out of 8. And the one was tonight on 4th and 1 when, for some reason, the Lions decided to run a stretch play on a pitchback to Jahmyr Gibbs, making him run 8 yards to get 1. That was one of the worst calls of the season from Ben Johnson. But regardless, this team finds a way. And, being there tonight, crowd was great. Atmosphere is amazing. You, the fans, are unbelievable how loud you are. But there was a little something that happened before the game that I thought was a very, very telltale sign. The Packers come out, everybody's booing, everybody's hissing, oh, the Packers, whatever. And here come the Lions out of the tunnel. Crowd goes nuts. They're let out by Jared Goff and Penei Sewell. And I'm like, wait, Jared Goff's coming out first. They're introducing the defense? Because the defense has 14 guys on injured reserve. I'm not naming them all, but there's a ton of them. And Josh Pascal wasn't playing. And Levi Onwuzurike wasn't playing. And DJ Reader wasn't playing. So you got dudes like Pat O'Connor, Quan Alexander, Al-Qadim Muhammad getting introduced to the crowd. And it's like, I love that. I loved it. It was like, these misfits need to be introduced. They need to get some shine. I turned to Turner and I said, Patrick O'Connor may never start another game in his whole career. Kid from Eastern Michigan. He's getting a chance to not only start the game, but get an introduction to the crowd. And he gets to run out of the tunnel. It tells you what this team's about and how unselfish they are. It would have been very easy to just introduce the offense because the offense is, other than Taylor Decker, everybody's healthy. But on the defense tonight, they basically started up front. Muhammad, Zadarius Smith, Lee McNeil, and Patrick O'Connor. Quan Alexander, who was just signed, started at linebacker. Zeke Turner made a very big stop on Jordan Love on a scramble play in the 4th quarter tonight. You had plenty of guys out on the field that you didn't even know who they were. Jonah Williams, number 78. You have to look it up in your program to see who that is. Broderick Martin's out there. Hadn't played all year. Hadn't played in 2 years. Right? David Long's out there. Yet this defense, and yes, I get it. They gave up 31 points. It wasn't the greatest performance. But Jared Goff threw a bad interception. Packers got a short field. But when the Lions needed some stops tonight, they got them. Green Bay had to settle for a field goal late to make it a 31-31 game, but left enough time on the clock for the Lions to come down and score. Jared Goff to Tim Patrick tonight over and over again was a deadly combination. Goff finished tonight, where is it? 32 out of 41, 283, 3 touchdowns, a passer rating of 109.7. The ground game was not great tonight. David Montgomery rushed 4 times for 51 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 15 carries, 43 yards. It just seemed like Green Bay was loading the box and doing a good job against the run. So the Lions were forced to throw more times than they wanted to. I didn't think Green Bay ran it enough tonight. Lions ran it 34 times, Green Bay 24. I was a little bit surprised at the amount of passing plays the Packers ran. But early in this game, when the Lions led 10-0 out of the gate, it was the defensive line. It was the Mohammeds, the O'Connors, the Martins, McNeil, that were getting penetration on Jordan Love and bothering him. Jordan Love tonight finished with a 206 passing yard night, just 1 touchdown. Yeah, he had a good passer rating, 111.7, but he didn't dominate this game. The Lions held Jaden Reed, a really good receiver, to 1 target, no catches. You got to take your hat off to this defense, this coaching staff, obviously the offense, because at the end of the game, Lions got the ball with just over 2 minutes to go. You knew they were going down and scoring. You knew it. Green Bay could not stop them. Jared Goff made some big throws when needed. Offensive line did the job. They played through some penalties. The Frank Ragnow holding call, which gave him a 1st and 20 late. Yet the Lions still found a way. As Goff hit Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery got the first down. And this team is something special. I just figured going into tonight, and I was wrong, although I got the score right. I said 34-31 Green Bay. I just thought it was going to be too much to overcome. Too many guys out. Then Ali McNeil gets a concussion and has to leave the game. Brian Branch injured his leg at the end of the game and had to come out. Brandon Joseph came in. And you're like, oh my gosh, how many more guys is this team going to lose on defense? And yet, defense did a pretty darn good job tonight. Yes, the Packers put up 31 points. Yes, there were some times in the second half you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why can't they stop Green Bay? Packers put up 24 second half points. But the Lions held Green Bay to 7 first half points. If I told you at the start of the day, Josh Jacobs would only run for 66 yards, and I know he had 3 touchdowns, all of them the short variety. You take that. You take it. And the Lions just found a way, time and time again, to get it done. Doesn't matter if it's pretty, doesn't matter if they cover the spread, doesn't matter about double-digit wins and all this. And next week's going to be very difficult with Buffalo, but a division game, the Lions have not lost a division game yet. Minnesota beat them. Chicago beat them. Green Bay twice beat them. They got to go to Chicago later in the year. They got to host Minnesota in week 18. This team gets it done. They get it done. All they do is win. And they clinch a playoff berth tonight. And I know for many people that's not a big deal. It is a big deal because this franchise for years was never in the tournament. Never did the heavy lifting in January. Never. And now they're going to do it again. Get back to the postseason again. Second straight year.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. The Green Bay Packers got absolutely robbed on
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
I can't remember the last time I came on this microphone after a game so incensed over the officiating. I freaking hate complaining about officiating. I hate it. It is so lame. It's so stupid that we have to come on here and do this. But the reality is, that's what happened in this football game. It was big call after big call after big call after big call. Missed, going the wrong direction, a touchdown because Keyshawn Nixon is clean up the middle, gets grabbed, no call. Jordan Love, smacked in the face, clear as day, no call. They showed a replay. They highlighted Amon-Ra St. Brown taking Xavier McKinney's helmet off. Clean shot to the helmet. No call. And on that last offensive possession by the Packers, that offensive pass interference was absolutely garbage. Terrible. Trash all game long. It wasn't even a pick play. Learn ball, officiators. Learn ball. It was supposed to be a screen to the opposite side. Jordan Love has to roll to his right to find Josh Jacobs. It was not in the play call for him to go pick the safety who has to come out late to the running back. These sorts of plays happen every time. And if you're going to call that one, then you have to call the one against Keyshawn Nixon late in the game. It was just not an even playing field. And I'm not going to accuse anybody of fixing matches. That part of it is stupid. This is the Hanlon's razor. Do not ascribe to malice what can be more easily explained by incompetence. The NFL officiating is just this bad. It's just this bad. It hasn't cost the Packers this year, but it has been this bad all season. For years, it has been this bad. The Packers in this football game averaged 6.6 yards per play. The Lions, 5.1 yards per play. Turnovers, even. Penalties, even. Except a slew of them not called. The Packers, especially in the second half, well outplayed the Lions. But it wasn't enough because they had to overcome not just the Lions, but the Lions and the officiating. Again, I hate this. I hate it. Get mad in the comments, Lions fans. Fine. Get mad. Cry. I get it. I hate this too. I wish this game had been decided on the football field, but that's not what happened. It was so obvious all game that this is how it was. I called it in the first quarter. I guess this is just what it's going to be. I don't have fear of the Lions in the postseason. I hope this happens again. I really do. I hope we get to see this matchup one more time. First of all, it's really hard to beat a team three times in a row. But I also think the Packers in Detroit, they match up plenty well with this team. No Romeo Doubs, no Jair Alexander. To me, bigger than anything that the Lions were dealing with injury-wise. Now, I thought in the first half, let me give credit to the Lions. In the first half, their defense played outstanding. Aaron Glenn had them schemed up. They were playing more physical. The Packers' offensive line was not ready to meet this moment. They got down early. It's 17-7 at halftime. At the end of the first half, The Lions offense marches right down the field, scores as time remains. We have to talk about this, though. The flukiness of both of these games with the fourth down calls. 4 fourth down touchdowns plus a fourth down sealer. That is fluky as hell. That is fluky as hell. This is not. I said after the first half, I said the Lions look like they are clearly the better team. They were better coached. They were more disciplined, all those things. I do not come away from this game in the second half believing that because of the way the Packers played, because of the way the Packers responded. I believe these teams are pretty close. And I said this during the week. I said, look, if the Packers come out and play this team close and lose a close game, I'm not going to feel like it was a huge loss. Because the Lions should win. Even with the injuries, the Lions should win. But that this was the Packers' opportunity to prove that they are every bit as good as the Detroit Lions. They did that. They did that. What they had to overcome was some of the worst officiating I've ever seen in a Packers game. A game like it has been. And look, Lions fans, if you want to whine, if you want to cry, if you want to laugh at me being upset, please do. But ask a Packers fan friend who listens to this show and ask them when the last time I came on this program and complained about officiating. I hate doing it. I almost never do it. I really don't. Because it is, generally speaking, boring analysis. And usually it's just cope. But that's not what happened. The Packers got their red zone offense going. They moved the ball at will on this defense, this banged up defense. They got the key turnover. They got the key stop on fourth down to give them a lead. They had leads for much of the second half. This team is as good as the Lions. What they couldn't overcome was missed calls and bad calls all over the field all night. Now, I don't have any faith that if this game gets played again, it's not going to go the same way. Because it's hard not to feel like the fix wasn't in. Let me try and say that in the affirmative. It felt like for long stretches of this game that the fix was in. That the Lions got the more favorable whistle at home. This is like an NBA game where the home team shot 30 free throws and the road team shot 15. That's what it felt like. And if that's what the NFL wants, I guess I understand it in a way. But that doesn't mean I have to accept it. This was embarrassing for the league. Embarrassing. It really was. I don't think any differently of the Packers after this game than I did going in. I thought they were every bit as good as the Lions. I thought they would beat the Lions. And I thought they, for really the entire second half and then parts of the first half, outplayed the Lions. They got the turnover they needed. If they don't have the Christian Watson turnover, they probably win this game. But if the Keyshawn Nixon penalty gets called correctly, they probably win this game. If the Christian Watson penalty or non-penalty gets called correctly, they probably win this game. So how can I sit here and blame the Packers when I don't think that's what happened? Credit the Lions for playing tough with all the defensive injuries that they have and Taylor Decker being out. Credit to the Lions. They did play well enough to win. But so did the Packers, and this game was not decided. I just want to see the game decided on the field. That's what I want. I don't come on the post-game show to cope. It's not what I'm here for. It's not what I'm here to do. I don't think it's useful to anybody to do that. But I wanted the game to be decided on the field, and it wasn't.
The Chicago Blackhawks have fired head coach Luke Richardson.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Chicago Blackhawks officially fired head coach Luke Richardson after spending 2.5 years as the team's head coach. Richardson finishes with a 57, 118, and 15 record in his 2.5 years behind the bench, with the final straw seemingly being the 4-2 loss of the Blackhawks suffered last night to the Boston Bruins. Typical Blackhawks game that we've seen so many times already through the opening 26 contests. A good first period where the Blackhawks show enough to hang around. Then things start to go sideways in the second period, and they're not able to do enough to muster their way back in the third. It was something that has happened time and time again this year, and with the Blackhawks also not really showing any life offensively for another season here. And that's really been the story of Luke Richardson, was the story, I should say, of Luke Richardson's tenure, as the Blackhawks were dead last in every significant offensive category since he took over. 5-on-5 goals, scoring chances, high danger opportunities, shot attempts, all that stuff. The Blackhawks were dead last in that. And I think a lot of that just had to do with the style that Luke Richardson wants to play. Defense first at all costs. And I think that style of play didn't really work well with Connor Bedard's development. And we've seen him be as frustrated as he's been at the NHL level. The numbers obviously aren't where we want them to be. And I think just a greater fact that the general direction of this team for the rest of the year under Luke Richardson's leadership, it was going to be shaky. And one thing I do want to preface, I was surprised that the Blackhawks fired Luke Richardson this early into the season, but I certainly do understand it. The reason why I was surprised, though, is because of the aspirations around this Blackhawks team. It's not like this team was a Stanley Cup contender or anything. It's not really like this year is going to matter all that much. But as I talked about a couple of weeks ago, this big problem that the Blackhawks were, they were stuck in between a rock and a hard place, because not only were they not taking steps in the right direction as a team, even though we knew they weren't playoff contenders, but we also weren't seeing the development out of the young players that we wanted to see. And I think that was because of Luke Richardson's system and the way he goes about things. Connor Bedard, being a center iceman, has to focus in on a lot of defensive responsibilities, because that's what Luke Richardson puts on his center iceman. Lukas Reichel, who's had to play the center ice spot on the Blackhawks' fourth line all year long, despite being clearly the most talented skater on this team, at least skater who actually has offensive abilities to pair with it, yet he's playing 11 minutes per game. And I think the bigger problem, too, if you were to keep Luke Richardson around, it would be really tough, considering his style, the offensive struggles. I mean, the offense has been legitimately pitiful this season. It would be hard to call up a prospect like a Frank Nazar, like a Colton Dach, and expect them to go and do well with Luke Richardson's system, because we had seen how that went for Lukas Reichel over the last year and a half. And don't even get me started about how Richardson handled Reichel last year. I thought it was an absolute disaster. And even though Reichel has been looking a lot better as a player and producing pretty well on the fourth line, that hasn't earned him more of a sizable role, more minutes or anything. And it's like, okay, well, if we're not going to give the young guys opportunities, we at least got to be winning. We at least got to be taking steps in the right direction. And neither of this was happening. So it was kind of like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do for these final, 60 games of the regular season here, 55 games, whatever it may be. Not a math major. That's why I went to school for journalism. So yeah, while I didn't think the Blackhawks were going to fire Luke Richardson, I thought they were going to let him finish the season, and then next year was going to be a team option. I did not think the Blackhawks were going to pick up that team option because of what has gone down under Luke Richardson's tenure. But I understand why Kyle Davidson felt like he had to go in a different direction, because watching this style of play, watching what was going on with this Blackhawks team and continuing to allow them to go on the same path for the remainder of the season, I think that wasn't going to be good for anybody. So I get why Kyle Davidson did what he did. Shocking move that Luke Richardson, though, gets fired 26 games into the season. I do want to be sure to preface, though, that I think Luke Richardson, being a first-year head coach, also put him in a real tricky spot. Obviously, the roster hasn't been super talented these last few years. And listen, in comparison to Jeremy Colleton, Luke Richardson as a first-year head coach is head and shoulders above Jeremy Colleton. At least Luke Richardson knows how to keep games competitive. He knows how to do good things defensively. The Blackhawks, in the special teams departments are in the top half of the NHL on both the power play and the penalty kill. And I think the culture, the message, all in all, even though maybe that message had kind of gotten stale to some of the guys in the locker room. Altogether, I thought Luke Richardson established a pretty good culture for a first-year head coach. So he does deserve credit for that. I just think he was put in a real tough spot. And as a first-year head coach, he just didn't necessarily have the solutions to fix the Blackhawks' problems on the fly. And unfortunately, he's now out of a job because of that. I think Luke Richardson is going to learn from this experience. I think probably his next job isn't going to be a head coaching spot, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him in charge of defensemen for another NHL club and just continue to rack up good experiences, because I do think he can be a serviceable guy on a team's bench. It's just for a full-scale rebuild right here, right now, the spot the Blackhawks are in, I didn't think he was the guy for that. I think he could be a good guy to add on to a Stanley Cup playoff contender who's trying to tighten things up a little bit on the back end, because Luke Richardson has shown us he knows what he's doing on the defensive side of things. He's a 1,500 game former NHLer defensive defenseman, so he knows all about it. He's a former player himself, and I think that was part of him creating a good culture and, for the most part, players enjoying their time under Luke Richardson. I know losing isn't easy for anyone, but as far as how he went about coaching, I think the players like playing for him for the most part. So I think Luke Richardson is going to be better off in the long term from all of these experiences. I'm sure it's a tough day for him. I'm sure he feels like he failed the Blackhawks organization. And yeah, it's not going to be easy, but this is just something the Blackhawks, I think, had to do when they were looking in the mirror, because continuing, as I've mentioned, along this path that they've been on these opening 26 games, right, and just being such an offensive struggle for them to score more than 2 goals against legitimately anybody, they just couldn't go on like that and couldn't risk Connor Bedard's development in his sophomore campaign, even though he's only 19 years old, right? Like, the way Luke Richardson kind of gave him a bunch of different line mates this year and put him in different spots and never established a consistent line for Connor, I think that was a huge blunder of his as well. So unfortunate that Luke Richardson winds up getting fired, but that's the nature of the beast. Anders Sorensen now going to take over as the Blackhawks interim head coach. Mark Eaton is going to take over for Sorensen down in Rockford. The plan is for Sorensen to remain the head coach for the remainder of the season. Quite honestly, Blackhawks fans, I'm pretty intrigued by this idea. I know Sorensen doesn't have a ton of coaching experience aside from what he's done in Rockford. Obviously has never been up to the NHL level as a head coach, but he is someone who's been very familiar with the development level of this organization for the last few years. He's been close with someone like Alex Vlasic, Nolan Allen, Wyatt Kaiser, spent time with all of those guys down in Rockford, and is very familiar with a Frank Nazar, Cole Gutman, Colton Dock, Landon Slaggert, Kevin Korchinski. So I think this is a good spot for Anders Sorensen to be in terms of, I think he's going to be ushered in to help the development of this Blackhawks team. And I think they're going to get away from that defensive-minded style a little bit that Luke Richardson has really instilled on this group. And I do think that's going to be better in the long run for Connor Bedard and also for Frank Nazar, who I figure is now more likely to get a call-up because he's not going to have to play in Luke Richardson's system as a defensive-minded center. There were some concerns about, if you call him up and he doesn't have success, could we be dealing with another Lucas Reichel situation on our hands? And that's absolutely something we wanted to avoid. So Anders Sorensen taking over, quite honestly, has me excited to see just a new-look Blackhawks, because even though we were only 26 games in, it had gotten real old watching this team. And I think there can be some more excitement around this group now. And I think they can be a little bit more free with some of these players. So I'm interested to see how things are going to look with Anders Sorensen. Ultimately, the Blackhawks just needed a shakeup. Their style of play had gotten so stale. It was hard to win basically impossible to win games the way they were playing with their lack of speed, the lack of offense. I mean, Peter Mrazek and the goaltender, Arvid Soderblom, or Laurent Brossoit whenever he's going to be healthy. Luke Richardson's system basically required the Blackhawks goalie, whoever it may be, to stand on their heads and allow 2 goals or fewer. That was the only way this Blackhawks team was going to win games. Couldn't take much more of it. So yeah, surprised that Luke Richardson got fired. But again, I do understand why Kyle Davidson ultimately went with this route.
The NFL action as we head toward the playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You're going to want to check out some lines for the NFL this Sunday. Kirk Cousins faces his former team in Minnesota. FanDuel has the Vikings 5.5-point favorites over the Falcons. Or you could check out Bills Rams. FanDuel has the Bills 3.5-point favorites in LA. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
It's a play-in game. It is a play-in game for Boise State and UNLV. UNLV, what a job by Barry Odom. His name is going to keep popping up in coaching circles, folks. It just is. Doesn't matter what's happened in the past. What have you done for me lately? Taken UNLV and not just brought them back to what they were, because I don't know that there really was a time where they were something, at least not that I can remember. He's just made them into something relevant. Back-to-back appearances in the Mountain West Championship game. UNLV and my guy Ricky White, who was on the show earlier a couple weeks ago, which was awesome. They're getting another crack at Boise State. And I'll have my pick later at the end of the segment, but I want to give you 3 pivot points. Spencer, what's pivot point? I'm so glad you asked. You didn't, but you're going to get to hear about it anyway. A pivot point is different from a key to the game. A key to the game applies to a specific team. You've got to do this with it. You got to get this guy going. You got to stop the other team. Pivot points are things that can go either way. They can flip in this direction or they could pivot in that direction. And here are 3 pivot points that are going to define this game. Number 1. Well, this is going to be Ashton Genty, right? Nope, it's absolutely not. It's going to be which quarterback has a higher completion percentage. So, Malik Williams, who has taken over and been fantastic in the loss to Boise State, was 12 of 21 throwing the football. Also had an interception late in the first half that proved incredibly costly. In the other loss he's had as UNLV's starter, it was against Syracuse. He was 21 of 25. But this is, again, Boise State, and UNLV still could have, dare I say, should have won that football game against who we know is a good Syracuse team ranked inside the top 25. But Malik Williams this year is completing 64% of his passes. Flip over to the Boise State angle, and Maddox Madsen, who won the job in spring or fall camp from Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star USC recruit. Look, he's not anything special at the quarterback spot, but he's incredibly solid. He's incredibly capable. And when the Boise State offense is humming, Dirk Cutter loves to use play action. He's very clever, very creative, pro-style concepts, and Madsen is a high-level executor. 61%. That's his completion percentage this year. Against Oregon, he completed 50% of his passes. They lost that game by 3. Against Wyoming, a game they struggled to win, he was 14 of 26. Against Nevada, another game Boise State struggled to win, he was 9 of 20. So when he is not able to complete passes in an efficient way, Boise State does not play its best football. You think about Ashton Genty and say, well, he's the key. He's what makes it go. He's where the offense starts. He's not the end point, per se. He's not an entire dish. I love food analogies because they're delicious. Ashton Genty is the steak. But what else is on that plate? Mashed potatoes, vegetables, and preferably a béarnaise sauce. I'm a big béarnaise sort of guy. Well, Genty can't make up all those other components, but Maddox Madsen makes up several. Drop back passing game, play action passing game. And then you got to be solid in other areas, obviously, as well. Cross your T's, dot your I's, and such. So whichever quarterback has the higher completion percentage in this game, if you told me that right now, I'd say that team probably wins. That team probably wins. There's going to be plenty of attention paid to the running ability of Malik Williams or of Ashton Genty in this game, which I'm about to talk about. But first things first, whichever quarterback is more efficient, I think goes on to win the football game and goes to the college football playoff and maybe even gets a bye. I don't think UNLV would jump up and get the bye over the Big 12 champion. Boise State clearly would. You think of that, whatever you like. Pivot point number 2 is the running game factor. Can UNLV replicate what it did in the first matchup in Las Vegas many moons ago? It was a great game, highly competitive, 29-24 final. Boise State gets the win. Ashton Jeanty, 33 carries, 128 yards, under 4 yards a carry, a long run of 16. That's not the Ashton Jeanty who has propelled himself into the Heisman Trophy discussion, only to finish second, of course, to Travis Hunter because he's, really, really good and such. I'd vote for Jeanty, but I understand why Travis Hunter's going to win the award. I don't think it's outlandish. I just think it's a matter of disagreement and preference and such, but I digress. UNLV was bottling up Ashton Jeanty, got loose a little bit as the game went on, but that's not the efficient day that Boise State has relied on to carry an explosive offense. No runs over 20 yards, under 4 yards a carry. If you do that, UNLV has a great chance. But if that gets pivoted back in Boise State's direction, then suddenly the Broncos are an even more dangerous offense. And the passing attack is even more lethal because, like I said, Dirk Cutter, the offense coordinator, really good with play action. Really, really good. He runs a lot of NFL concepts. He always seems to have the tight end wide open whenever they need him to. So that's pivot point number 2. Pivot point number 3. In a game, the Boise State is favored by around a field goal, according to our friends at FanDuel. I expect to be close and competitive because last time they played, it was close. It was competitive. It came down to a couple situations. I almost went turnovers here. I have a sneaky suspicion. That special teams are going to loom large. That there is going to be a play. It could be a block kick. It could be a return. It could be a long field goal. Something is going to swing the special teams momentum or the overall grade in the game towards one team or the other. And that is pivot point number 3. Which quarterback has the higher completion percentage? Can UNLV replicate its Ashton Jeanty defensive performance in the way that they bottled him up more than most others have been able to so far? And who wins the special teams battle? Who can make that one play? It might be kicking. It might be in the return. Heck, it could be a punt that allows your defense to get the ball back because you had them pinned down and they just had to hand off a couple times. It could be anything like that. So the moment you've all been waiting for, of course, my game prediction here. Look, UNLV is a good football team, a really good football team. I think conference championship weekend as a whole is going to be outstanding. Every single point spread is under a touchdown. I think every point spread is under 5. That means Vegas expects a lot of tight competitive games. The stakes in this one are massive. A group of 5 team has made the playoff but one time. That was Cincinnati many moons ago with Luke Fickell. They went undefeated. They'd beaten Notre Dame earlier in the season. But whoever wins this game, make no mistake about it, they will not get challenged by the American Conference champ. That will not take place. Army could beat Tulane. Tulane is not ranked, so it does not matter. They will not climb up. They will not be a high enough ranked conference champion. This is a play-in game. Big stakes here. And for Spencer Danielson, who a year ago at this time was just learning. Actually, hold on. Boise State fans, you correct me if I'm wrong. A year ago at this time, Spencer Danielson hadn't even been named the head coach yet. He was the interim head coach. He was interviewing for the job. I think it's going pretty darn well. And I think it will continue to do so here. I don't think UNLV, as impressive as they were at home against Ashton Jeanty, I don't think they can keep him under 4 yards of carry again. I think Jeanty goes for 150 plus, maybe a couple touchdowns. This is a fun, competitive, high-scoring football game. 36-31. I'll take Boise State to win. I'll take Boise State to cover as well.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, keys to victory and who needs to execute said keys. Number 1, discussed this on Wednesday. I'm sticking with it. slow down Tyler Warren and force Drew Aller to throw the ball to the perimeter. I have not seen them do that consistently this season. I like Oregon's corners. We'll see if Jaleel Florence plays. He did not against Washington, but I think I'm in agreement with all of you in saying Nico Reed has played well this year. Dante Manning's having a solid season. And Jabbar Muhammad is, I think, near the top of the Big Ten in pass breakups this year. So you've got to trust those guys and say, look, if you're going to throw the ball, Drew Aller, it's not going to be to number 44. I don't know what that game plan looks like. I do know who would have to execute no matter how Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning, and company decide, hey, we want to slow down number 44 in the blue and white. Number one guy that pops into my mind, Tysheem Johnson. Tysheem Johnson, you could see Kobe Savage get matched up onto him as well. I think they've, interchanged Savage and Tysheem on the back end. You traditionally think, oh, you got a free safety, strong safety. Both guys have played down in the box. Both guys have played over the top this season as well. And I think Oregon's, knock on wood, mostly done a good job of keeping explosive passing plays out of the repertoire for opposing offenses and made them work the middle of the field and take underneath routes. And that's a credit to the safeties, the defensive or the corners as well. But the safeties have not been a liability in coverage so far. But matching up with tight ends, you go back to the Ohio State game, you go back to the Michigan game, it's usually Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage. I'd put Brandon Johnson in here, but he's matching up with wideouts, and I think that's probably going to continue. So if you want to keep Tyler Warren, and keeping him in check, by the way, is anything under 5 receptions or fewer, 70 yards or fewer. If he's not accounting for, 100 or 150 yards of total offense, because, they'll snap it to him sometimes. He could have a passing play in this game. He'll run the ball in the red zone in particular. They do all sorts of things with him. If you're able to keep him under 70 yards receiving and not allow him to rack up, 8, 9, 10 receptions, I think that's doing a good job. Because you're not going to hold him to 0 catches. If Oregon does that, that would be a remarkable defensive feat, and you'd essentially have to double him on every play. I don't think they're going to do that. But Tysheem Johnson, maybe Kobe Savage, and the linebackers will come into play as well. Again, depends on what kind of coverage you're calling on a particular play. Sometimes Bryce Betcher might get matched up with him, or Jeff Bossa might get. Bossa tends to play more around the line of scrimmage, spying quarterbacks, contain rushes, and those sorts of things. So probably not Bossa as much, but Betcher and Jackson, they could come into play here as well. But I think Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage are the guys that pop into my head first and foremost that make me think, yeah, they've got to play well if Oregon's going to hit on this particular key to the game. So that's key number 1. Key number 2, win the rushing battle. Does this key sound familiar playing a high-level Big Ten team? It should. In the Michigan game, Oregon outran the Wolverines, won by 21 points. In the Ohio State game, Oregon outran just barely the Buckeyes and won. In 2021 against the Buckeyes, Oregon outran Ohio State and won the football game. That has consistently been a deciding factor when these high-level, top of the Big Ten teams play high-profile games. Whoever is able to run for more yards. Who do you think ran for more yards, Michigan and Ohio State last Saturday? Pretty darn sure it was Michigan. I'll double check, but I would be pretty surprised if it was not the good old. That's the story on the fines and whatnot. Let's see team stats. Here we go. Wait for it. Up 173-77. Michigan wins the football game. We heard that a lot coming into the Big Ten. You got to match the physicality. You got to be able to run the ball. You got to be able to do that. Well, Oregon's been able to do that. That's a big reason why they are 12-0. And Penn State is in the same category, though certainly a notch below Ohio State in past years because they've lost 8 straight to the Buckeyes. They haven't beaten Michigan in a long time either. But one of the reasons is they haven't been exceptional in the trenches. I think Penn State is a good team on both sides of the lines of scrimmage. I'll talk more about that for my third key to the game as well. But you look at these games and the team that's able to run for more yards, this is a twofold thought. On the one hand, I want to see Oregon run the ball against a run defense that isn't 14th in the Big Ten, not in the country, in the Big Ten. That's what Washington was. And I was thrilled. Absolutely thrilled with how Oregon ran the ball last week. They do that again. They do that in any game. I don't think Oregon will ever lose a football game when they run for 200 yards. There are other teams that can. But with the way this Oregon defense is and what that means for the offense, I cannot see a world where Oregon loses a game running for 200 yards. They don't have to do that per se in this particular matchup, but they do have to play well defensively and contain Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Those two guys are incredibly capable. They are explosive. They are physical. They will break tackles. They are really good. They are as good of a running back tandem as exists in college football. I think that Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State are number one. These guys could be number two. I'd have to think through everybody in the country that's healthy, because Texas had a couple good backs, but they both got hurt. Like, these guys are top five. This is a top five running back tandem. You got to take them away. And that kind of goes back to the crux of key point number one. Make Drew Aller throw the ball outside the numbers and down the field. Make him do it. And make him do it to somebody that isn't Tyler Warren. So, who comes into play for winning the rushing attack? I think this is about the interior of the lines of scrimmage. Derek Harmon, Jamari Caldwell, Amari Washington, Jordan Birch have a big game. Control the line of scrimmage. Don't force Oregon to bring an extra safety down into the box or blitz guys more in order to stop the run game or contain it. Got to be able to win the matchup up front. And then conversely, I think it's about the interior of the offensive line. Poncho and Marcus Harper and Kavika Rogers and Nishad Strother, whatever combinations out there at any given time, got to be able to get movement. Got to be able to run the football, create lanes for Jordan James and Noah Whittington to run through. So I think the interior offensive line, defensive line are the guys that will most determine whether Oregon wins the rushing attack in this game. But if they do, I think they absolutely win the game. If there were, that could honestly be key number one, because I think if Oregon does that, they will win. If they don't stop Tyler Warren, they can still win. It might just be a little bit tougher. Key number three, last but certainly not least, no more than 2 sacks. This Oregon offensive line is one of the final 3 for the Joe Moore Award. Absolute studs. Dylan Gabriel deserves some credit for that as well, because he's got to get him in the right protections. He's got to get the ball out of his hands. He's got to not take sacks, not run himself into sacks like Caleb Williams has been known to do from time to time, and he hasn't. He's done a really good job. He has looked like the veteran quarterback we were hoping Oregon got in the offseason. I think he's done a great job in this particular area. This matchup, certainly the interior of the offensive line, it matters. But this will come down to Josh Connerly and a Johnny Cornelius. Can those two guys replicate the performance that they had against Ohio State and Michigan? 0 sacks allowed. Of the 8 starting defensive linemen between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines, they could have as many as 6 first-rounders. They have at least 4. At least 4. And guess what? There's a top 10 pick on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Abdul Carter is going to be no later, I think, than number 7 coming off of the NFL draft board in the spring. Maybe he can go and be a part of the Broncos defense and support our guy Bo Nix. But Connerly and Cornelius, Jeff Schwartz tweeted out after that Ohio State game that those two guys, with their performance there, made themselves some money. They could do it again right here. And Connerly was phenomenal against Washington this past week. If Josh and Johnny step up big in this game and Oregon allows no more than 2 sacks, which frankly would be more than we've come to expect, but if it's limited, if you don't let that Penn State defensive line control the game and pressure Dylan Gabriel, I trust Oregon's receivers in the passing game to be effective enough against a talented Penn State secondary. But if you give the quarterback time, there's not a lot that corners can do consistently. So those are my keys, my prediction. Yeah, I'll give it to you right now. Why not? I've got Oregon winning 27-17. This is a good Penn State defense. I think the Oregon offense will be just fine. Settle for a couple field goals, perhaps. Maybe Abdul Carter gets a sack to prevent Oregon from getting a touchdown here or there. But I trust the Oregon defense in this spot. Penn State did not manage an offensive touchdown against Ohio State. I think they will here. I do. But I don't think they're going to hit 20 points. So I'll go Oregon 27, Penn State 17.
The NFL action as we head toward the playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You're going to want to check out some lines for the NFL this Sunday. Kirk Cousins faces his former team in Minnesota. FanDuel has the Vikings 5.5-point favorites over the Falcons. Or you could check out Bills-Rams. FanDuel has the Bills 3.5-point favorites in LA. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Eric Bieniemy, in the blink of an eye, he's gone.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
Of course, the news of the day. It's not necessarily portal related. It might have affected some things with the decommits, the flips, and some of the portal guys, which may return. Who knows? Eric Bieniemy is gone. Where was I getting the news? I decided it was a fantastic day to go watch a 3-hour movie because nothing major would break on this day, right? We had early signing day. Everything hit that was going to hit, right? You know, I'm in the middle of the movie. Cool. I get out. Boom. Bieniemy's gone. Boom. Juan Castillo gone. Boom. Oh, yeah, they got his replacement. 1, 2, 3. So, yes, you're going to hear some Wicked references in this show. All right? Because I wasn't defying gravity when I saw the changes. My jaw dropped. All right? And I think this move is going to be very popular. Now we're done with the Wicked references. Here we go. Eric Bieniemy, he is absolutely gone. All right. Regardless of what he says in his joint statement, I think what did his agent say? I read it. Something like he views Deshaun Foster as a brother. He was going to help him out, and that he was only meant to be at UCLA a year and then go to the NFL in 2025. Yeah, because you're going to be like an analyst of some sort. Because UCLA had one of the worst offensive numbers in all the country, all right? As much as even the biggest hater of Chip Kelly ever, we can all agree Chip Kelly would have done much better with this offense than Eric Bieniemy ended up doing. With the same players, in my opinion, because he literally did. Even though Chip Kelly had worse numbers in 23 than he did in years previous, he did pretty much a lot better than the same thing Eric Bieniemy had in 24. Obviously, some differences on the O-line, injuries. All right, but pretty much the same thing. Bieniemy really sunk what UCLA's offensive potential was in 2024. All right, with a returning starting quarterback, a returning starting running back, a returning starting tight end that's really good, and some pretty lethal receiving options, including a young freshman like Quasi Gilmer who was blowing up too. And large in part, a decent portion of the O-line returning from the year before. That could run the ball. That could run the damn ball. And that means Juan Castillo, who came with Bieniemy, also left. It didn't say, or I did not read that it was fired. I think, what was it, Yahoo Sports who had the first news? I saw it first from Pete Thamel. Either way, Bieniemy's gone. Don't let the statement fool you. UCLA got rid of him. Whatever. They mutually, okay, Deshaun Foster probably wisened up, or he probably knew this, even though he had a presser the night before and said, I haven't really thought about staff changes yet. I'm still having my exit interviews. Yeah, the big bombshell is coming. Bieniemy's out. All right, that's huge. That's a huge thing for UCLA to be like, hey, all right, year one, we're going to pivot, and not just pivot, we're going to do so immediately. Signing day, all right, maybe that cost him Madden, Leava, and Jace Brown. Maybe UCLA didn't want them in the first place after they realized Bieniemy's not their man. Okay, but the fact that not only they got rid of the offensive coordinator and the O-line, which was pretty much dismal in portions when it came to run blocking at some spots, and then you have the replacement, all right? UCLA has the replacement. It's Tino Sunseri, Indiana's QB coach and co-offensive coordinator, to become UCLA's offensive coordinator. He's going to stay with Indiana through the rest of the playoff, and UCLA is purging a now bitter Big Ten rival, and that is a huge get. I think that's a huge get. If you're looking for young and up and coming, all right, and you're like, all right, we went with an old guy, in Bieniemy's ranks. As much as we want to despise Bieniemy now, I thought it was a decent choice. He went with the big name. We all wondered what Deshaun Foster was going to do with his first hire. All right, they swung and missed on the first big hire. But I think this next one, getting Sunseri from Indiana, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, UCLA is getting a coordinator for one of the most up-and-coming programs in a one-year turnaround at Indiana under Kurt Cignetti, with an offense that was pretty much clicking for a large portion of the year. And the only time it didn't really do much was against Ohio State. All right? That's not a bad thing. Indiana's done a lot, and they really pushed the door and were out-muscling and way more physical than UCLA's defense the time they came to the Rose Bowl and beat down the Bruins. All right? And UCLA's defense, we realized a lot after the Indiana game, was pretty darn good in some aspects, in some good statistical categories. And Indiana beat some of those numbers by the time the season averages came to an end. So to bring in a youngster, I was talking to the Locked On Who's Your Host, Jacob Goins. I texted him, I was like, hey, how do you say the guy's name? And he sent me the text. He's like, I am super mad right now because that's a huge hire. That's a great hire. That's what the Locked On Hoosiers host, Jacob Goins, said. That was what he sent me via text. Hey, yeah, that's a good hire for you guys. So Indiana is ticked off that UCLA got a guy like this. And that's going to help UCLA pivot not only to go get in the portal really quick, because they can go find a quarterback. They can go find other options they want. Maybe they might purge from other places in the Big Ten. Or they could simply, with Sunseri's blessing, or maybe Deshaun Foster realizing that, hey, some of these guys leaving the portal, he can get them back. That, as much as the portal is a blessing and a curse, guys can still come back. Unlikely, but it happened for a couple of times for UCLA in this most recent season. At least 3 guys, I think, came back to UCLA after entering the portal prior to the 24 season. Now, this isn't a show to debate the merits of a Justin Martin or a TJ Harden or, a Logan Loya, right? That's all. UCLA has options and plans. And Deshaun Foster talked about, hey, we got the money to go get with our NIL budget a quarterback, and we're going to prove that. All right. And he wasn't thinking that these guys were going to go chase after a bag, because UCLA's bag right now is being pushed towards Eric Bieniemy, who had like a 500,000+ retention bonus if he stayed on past July of 2025. So the move is now. It's only a 2-year deal. I think maybe the thought was if Bieniemy worked, and I thought, all right, big name hire. If it works, he's going to bolt for the NFL after a year. I didn't think this would be so bad that UCLA is going to have to pay him to literally leave. All right. I think it's a little slap in the face with that mutually agreed upon statements that, hey, we're helping out Deshaun. He needed help. Yeah, he certainly needed help, but you were the cause of UCLA needing a lot of help this year, to Eric Bieniemy. All right. That's what made this year so frustrating. But the fact that UCLA went out, turned around, and probably are axing their biggest weaknesses. Think about the moves they made coaching-wise. In the blink of an eye, they stole a Michigan State coach who flipped a 4-star DB and brought him with him. And now UCLA's got a pretty decent DB class coming in this class of 25. And he's going to run the secondary. He's already worked at UCLA. He's got some ties with pretty good recruiting. Then you get rid of your, addition by subtraction by getting rid of the O-line coach or him leaving and then getting rid of Eric Bieniemy. And all of a sudden, you bring in what Indy Star says, that was the report. I think it was Zach Osterman. So, same name, not the same face crew, but same name right there. Zach Osterman says Tino Sunseri is coming. And he was part of the staff that was able to make Curtis Rourke into a Heisman contender. All right. He came from like the MAC. Blessing in disguise, of course, Cignetti knew all the skills, knew all those players, having worked through the system in James Madison. So now it's up to UCLA's ability to scout talent, develop talent, or maybe Sunseri is going to come in here and say, look at these quarterbacks you got in this room. You actually have somebody who can run an offense that's not complicated and stupid. All right. So maybe there is somebody already in this locker room, because UCLA already signed quite a few quarterbacks. They already signed a Gamino coming in the class of 25, 24, 20. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this UCLA quarterbacking room that have no experience. And the hope is that without a complicated offense, the Bruins can all of a sudden go out and perform so much better. Because next year, the defense will be really young. Really, really young. And I hope UCLA does not lose to Kike Malloy, because he certainly proved his worth, sticking through everything being promoted to defensive coordinator, which could have been seen as a cost-cutting move, going internal promotion. But in the end, he made his promotion worth it. All right. So UCLA's got to shell out money to make sure Malloy does not get stolen and poached. All right. Maybe USC is going to try and make him a defensive coordinator. UCLA's got to keep him, because if they lose another defensive coordinator and it's like the 5th guy in like 5 years, I'm sorry. How do you even recruit the defense at that point? How? A guy that's so passionate, that can recruit, that's now getting a staff that can recruit and is talented. And I think former UCLA players on social media were loving it from various eras, previous UCLA regimes, who could go recruit. And I think Michigan State was hurt. So the Bruins have poached 2 coaches from separate Big Ten foes and have turned them into what I think to be good hires, while getting rid of the negativity, getting rid of what was some of the worst part of 24. All right. While Deshaun Foster might not be bombastic, I'd like to give him credit for hopefully being intelligent, say I was wrong, or whatever his support staff is, all coming together, the think tank, realizing, hey, this did not work. And they've made their move.